Before we begin, do you have a theory about this case or a story of your own? Leave a message on our socials. Our handles are all just Nightwatch Files without the space, or head over to nightwatchfiles.com to find them all in one place. Your insights might be featured in a future episode. I'm Harper Finley, and this is Nightwatch Files. Upon returning from a business trip to Houston on January 30th, 2019, Charles Vallow discovered that his wife Lori had stolen his truck from the airport parking lot, emptied his business bank account, and changed the locks on their rental home. Unable to get inside or reach his children, Charles called the police to request a welfare check and explicitly warned officers that his wife was threatening to kill him. During his interactions with law enforcement, Charles frantically tried to explain Lori's escalating and dangerous religious delusions. He told officers that Lori had lost her reality, believed she was a resurrected deity married to the angel Moroni, and thought she was receiving direct instructions from Jesus Christ. Charles reported that Lori claimed he was already dead and that his physical body had been taken over by an evil spirit named Nick Schneider. According to Charles, Lori told him over the phone, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are or what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers." Fearing for his life and the safety of his son, JJ, Charles filed an emergency mental health petition to have Lori involuntarily evaluated at a psychiatric facility. In the petition, Charles documented her threats in chilling detail, writing that she believed she was a god assigned to gather the 144,000 for Christ's second coming in July 2020. He wrote that Lori had explicitly warned him, "I was in the way and she would have to murder me if I tried to stop her," adding that she would have an angel there to help dispose of my body. Despite Charles's desperate pleas that his wife needed serious help and that her threats had scared the crap out of me, the responding officers were skeptical that Lori's bizarre religious claims amounted to a direct, actionable threat of violence. Law enforcement ultimately told Charles they could not hold her against her will or force a sting operation, leaving him fearing for his life. Lori Noreen Cox was born on June 26, 1973, on a 100-degree day when a heavy smog covered the San Bernardino Valley. Sources differ slightly on her exact birth city, placing it either in Loma Linda or Rialto, California. She was the fifth child born to Barry and Janice Cox, joining older siblings Stacy, Alexander, Adam, and Laura, who died in infancy, and was later followed by her younger sister, Summer. The Cox family lived in affluence in a large home on the ultra-exclusive El Rancho Verde Country Club in Rialto, directly across from an 18-hole golf course. Her father, Barry, was a successful life insurance underwriter who unsuccessfully ran for the Rialto City Council in 1974. The family was described as flamboyant and not strictly devout, though they occasionally attended the Redlands, California temple. Barry and Janice frequently pulled their children out of school to accompany them to the Santa Anita racetrack for good luck, and the parents often left the children alone to take weekend trips to Hawaii. While away, they would leave teenage Alex in charge with blank checks, which he often used on himself and to throw parties. Furthermore, her parents engaged in a decades-long battle with the IRS. They refused to pay federal income taxes in 1988, 1989, and 1990, and Barry openly argued that the IRS was an illegal, criminal organization. Known affectionately by her family as Lolo, Lori began her education at Trapp Elementary School in 1980. As a child, she was slightly overweight with blonde hair and blue eyes, and was known for being sweet, kind, and possessing a natural charm that drew people to her. She earned good grades with little effort and won the Trapp Elementary Spelling Bee as a fifth grader in May 1984. In middle school at Ben Kolb Middle School, she sang in the choir and played on a church softball team coached by her mother. Because her parents were not very present, Lori craved stability and frequently spent Friday nights and holidays at the home of her best friend, Rose Vaughn, whose family cooked dinner every night. In the 6th grade, Lori's mother, Janice, who was obsessed with appearance and weight, placed Lori on a strict diet so she could become a cheerleader and would publicly ridicule Lori if she caught her eating fattening foods. The Cox household was highly dysfunctional, described by Lori's older sister Stacy as a psychological hornet's nest. Lori later recounted childhood trauma to friends, including incidents where her mother would lock her father out of the house, leaving him to bang on the children's bedroom windows begging to be let inside. There are also severe allegations regarding Lori's relationship with her older brother, Alex. In 7th grade, Lori tearfully confided to her best friend Rose that Alex wanted to have sex with her and had been making sexual moves toward her. Rose also recalled Alex having a creepy fixation on Lori and watching them play in the pool. Alex's ex-wife, Debbie, later reported to police that she witnessed inappropriate sexual touching and simulated sex acts between Alex and Lori, where Lori would wrap her legs around Alex's waist and bounce up and down while they moaned. Alex frequently referred to his sister as hot. Upon entering Eisenhower High School in the fall of 1988, Lori had slimmed down and joined the cheerleading squad as a flyer. Lori became highly popular, driving friends to Taco Bell for lunch, attending 6 a.m. LDS seminary classes before school, and hosting the cheer squad at her family's pool to rehearse routines to 1960s music. However, Rose Vaughn noted a narcissistic shift in Lori's behavior during this time. Lori bleached her hair, wore skimpy clothing, began wearing red lipstick, and loved being the center of attention. During her senior year, Lori began dating Nelson Yanes, a wealthy neighborhood boy who was not Mormon. Her best friend considered Yanes a hothead, with a temper who yelled at Lori in the school hallways, noting that Lori would cower and never stand up for herself. Lori graduated from Eisenhower High School on June 12, 1991. Although she initially prepared to serve an LDS church mission and stated she wanted to attend Brigham Young University, she did neither. Instead, at age 18, she moved in with Yanes right after graduation. Lori's parents strongly disapproved of the relationship. According to Lori's brother Adam, Nelson was a known drug dealer deep in the local party scene who introduced Lori to drugs. When her parents forbade the relationship, Lori obtained a restraining order against her entire family and eloped with Yanes to Las Vegas in 1992. No friends or family attended the wedding. The marriage was incredibly brief. Approximately a year later, Lori told her friend Rose that she was divorcing Nelson, claiming that he was beating her up. Her brother Adam reported that Lori had the marriage annulled. Following the end of her marriage to Nelson Yanes, Lori's father, Barry Cox, tempted her with a Honda CRX and a one-way road trip to Texas. In 1992, Lori moved to Austin, Texas, where she enrolled at Baldwin Beauty Schools and eventually found a job working as a hairstylist in a local salon. Lori's older brother Adam was already living in Austin, trying to make a name for himself as a shock jock radio DJ under the moniker Bo Nasty. Lori initially lived in an apartment with Adam. Adam's fiancée, Nicole Meyer, met Lori shortly after she arrived and described her as beautiful and outgoing, but noted she was someone who constantly craved attention, looked in the mirror more than anyone I know, and always had drama in her life. On July 1, 1995, Lori attended Adam and Nicole's sealing service at the LDS Temple in La Jolla, California. Between September and November of 1993, Lori moved to Washington State to temporarily live with her older sister Stacy and her brother-in-law Steve Cope. During her time living with the Copes, Lori was pregnant. Because Lori was young, single, and recently divorced, Stacy wanted Lori to carry the pregnancy to term and allow her and Steve to legally adopt and raise the child. According to later divorce filings between Steve and Stacy, Steve Cope's court declarations allege that the father of Lori's unborn baby was a pothead on steroids. However, the planned adoption never came to fruition. According to Steve Cope's court documents, Lori suffered a miscarriage before they had the chance to adopt the baby. Shortly after this period, Lori left Washington and relocated to Austin, Texas, where she attended cosmetology school and began dating William LaGioia, who was a year older than her. LaGioia had trouble holding down jobs and at one point worked as a male exotic dancer. Lori wanted William to move into the apartment she shared with her brother Adam, but Adam refused, prompting Lori to move out and get a separate apartment with LaGioia. Their relationship was fraught and tempestuous. They lived together periodically on and off over the next few years, and Lori tried without success to convert him to Mormonism. The relationship quickly turned violent, with police being called to their Bluff Springs Road house on several occasions. In a later criminal complaint, Lori described William as manipulative, deceitful, and constantly drunk. On July 16, 1995, Travis County Deputy Michael Mancius responded to a call where Lori claimed William had hit her in the mouth and thrown her onto a bed. The deputy noted a small cut on the inside of Lori's upper lip, resulting in an assault charge against LaGioia. However, the case was later dismissed because Lori failed to show up for court. Despite the history of severe domestic violence and her church's disapproval of unmarried couples living together, Lori became pregnant with William's child. On October 22, 1995, 22-year-old Lori married William LaGioia, 23, in Austin. She was approximately 3 months pregnant at the time. No one from Lori's family attended the wedding. The marriage was filled with constant drama, and Lori frequently called 911. On February 21, 1996, while heavily pregnant, Lori swore out an affidavit against her husband, accusing him of subjecting her to mental and physical abuse over the previous 3 years. In the complaint, Lori stated that William hit and pushed her, and that he would purposefully hold the phone away from her so she could not call the police for help. She also alleged that William threatened to kill both her and their unborn child if she dared to call the police to have him arrested again. He also allegedly warned her that if he were sent to jail, he would track her down and kill her, no matter how long it took. Despite the severity of these allegations, an Austin court dismissed the case. As a result of the escalating abuse and the subsequent court dismissal, the couple separated. By the time Lori gave birth to Colby on April 8, 1996, William had already left and moved back into his parents' house in Brackettville, Texas. When filling out the hospital forms, Lori deliberately did not list anyone as the boy's father. After Colby was born, William agreed to convert to Mormonism so the couple could reunite and raise their son together. In mid-July 1996, Lori drove 3-month-old Colby 200 miles west to Brackettville to attend William's baptism. Upon arriving, Lori discovered that William had been living with another woman. Despite this, William apologized and pleaded that he wanted and needed his wife and baby, convincing Lori to move into his parents' house. According to a criminal complaint Lori later filed, William took her car keys and effectively imprisoned her and Colby at his parents' house for several months. In early November 1996, while William was allegedly passed out drunk following a one-night stand with a new girlfriend, Lori sneaked out with Colby at 4 a.m. and drove to her parents' new home in San Antonio, Texas. William called Lori every day for 2 weeks, begging her to return. Lori eventually relented to give him one last chance, noting in her affidavit that she was desperate for help and needed to retrieve her and her baby's belongings. When she subsequently tried to leave the Brackettville house with Colby, William and his father, Vito LaGioia, told her she was free to go, but that Colby had to remain with them, which forced Lori to stay. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. The breaking point occurred around Thanksgiving when the couple traveled to Lori's parents' home in San Antonio so Lori could earn extra money cutting relatives' hair. The plan was for William to drive Lori's car back to Brackettville and return to San Antonio with all of their belongings. Instead, William kept the car, failed to return their belongings, and allegedly used the baby's Lone Star welfare card for his personal expenses. Lori, accompanied by her father and the Brackettville sheriff, went to Vito LaGioia's house to retrieve her vehicle. They arrived to find Lori's belongings dumped in the street, and she had to call a repo company to get her car back. Lori's brother Adam later offered a different version of events, claiming Lori actually gave William the vehicle in exchange for him legally relinquishing his parental rights to Colby to avoid financial responsibility, which is permitted under Texas law. Following this incident, Lori immediately filed for divorce, writing in her complaint that William was void of any light and intelligence to know the difference between right and wrong. Following the split, Lori spent the remainder of the 1990s as a single mother in her 20s, struggling to survive financially as a hairstylist in the Austin, Texas area. She remained close to her parents and lived with them for a time after they relocated to San Antonio. Overall, however, Lori lived a rootless existence, drifting from job to job and moving frequently. Her young son, Colby, represented the only permanence in her life, and he later recalled these early years as a difficult time when his mother floundered. Colby was forced to grow up quickly, becoming accustomed to packing his belongings and moving at the drop of a hat, which fostered a deep protectiveness over his mother. Lori treated Colby more like a best friend than a son. In the late 1990s, Lori lived in Westlake, Texas, where she befriended a woman named Tammy Joyce. Tammy recalled that Lori took excellent care of Colby and was impressed by Lori's physical discipline, noting that she kept in shape by running twice a day and avoiding alcohol. Lori confided in Tammy that she had been madly in love with William LaGioia, had wanted a life with him, and blamed him for the failure of their marriage. Stacy Cope was Lori's oldest sister and was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, but frequently refused to adhere to her life-or-death insulin regimen. Her husband, Steve Cope, reported that Stacy struggled with severe mental health issues, an eating disorder, and germophobia. She viewed all food as poison, and by late 1994, her weight had plummeted to a mere 76 pounds, resulting in multiple hospitalizations where she had to be fed intravenously. According to Steve, Stacy was actively and passively suicidal. In the spring of 1995, she asked him how much insulin would be required to send her into a fatal diabetic coma, telling him, "It's my time to go." Fearing for the safety of their young daughter, Melanie, Steve Cope filed for and won full custody. Following the bitter divorce, Stacy relocated to Texas to be near her parents. In May 1998, Lori, her parents, her sister Summer, and her young son Colby took a family vacation to Hawaii. They left Lori's oldest brother, Alex Cox, behind in San Antonio to care for the ailing Stacy. On the very day the family arrived in Hawaii, Alex called to report that he had found Stacy unconscious, and she was rushed to the hospital. When Steve Cope arrived at the hospital with young Melanie, Alex Cox physically blocked Steve from entering the hospital room, only stepping aside to allow 9-year-old Melanie inside so she could slip a handwritten note into her comatose mother's hand. Stacy lapsed into a coma, was moved to a hospice facility, and died on May 21, 1998, at the age of 31. Disturbingly, Steve Cope later claimed to police that after Stacy died, Alex Cox stole his dead sister's credit cards and racked up $17,000 in charges. Lori's father, Barry Cox, was a right-wing political extremist who became deeply involved in the sovereign citizen and anti-government movements, drawing ideology from groups like Posse Comitatus. Barry fiercely opposed the federal income tax system, arguing that taxes were an illegal sham and that the IRS was a fraudulent criminal cabal that operated through deception and lies. Acting on these beliefs, Barry deliberately refused to pay any federal income taxes for 3 years in a row. His defiance culminated in criminal charges. On May 3, 1999, Barry Cox was sentenced to a year and a day in federal prison for making a false statement to the IRS. In addition to his prison term, he was ordered to pay nearly $250,000 in restitution, approximately $232,914. Upon his release, Barry did not back down. He spent decades acting as his own attorney, filing a slew of frivolous lawsuits against the United States, the IRS, the Department of Justice, and the Probation Office, demanding damages for personal injury and claiming he was immune from taxes. Federal judges repeatedly dismissed his suits as baseless attempts to collaterally attack his criminal conviction. Because Barry and his wife Janice continually refused to pay, their tax debt, swollen by interest and penalties, grew to over $320,000. To recoup the funds, the U.S. government foreclosed on the Cox family's San Antonio home, auctioning it off in 2008 and applying $114,000 to their debt. Barry and Janice even filed for voluntary bankruptcy in 2005 to try and escape the liability. In 2001, Lori and 5-year-old Colby moved to Driftwood, Texas, a town located about 24 miles west of Austin. It was during this time that she met Joseph Joe Ryan, a 43-year-old former Navy man and successful business analyst. Joe became a regular client at the hair salon where Lori worked. Joe was described by his sister as a bachelor till the rapture, who was waiting for perfection to come along, and he found it in Lori. Having grown up in the foster care system without close sibling relationships, Joe desperately wanted to start a family of his own. He immediately fell in love with Lori, who used her charm to win him over. For Lori, who had been floundering to find her footing for years, the handsome and wealthy Joe offered a much-needed lifeline of stability for herself and her young son. However, Colby did not welcome Joe, actively trying to stay out of his way and later claiming that his new stepfather was physically abusive. When Joe proposed, Lori accepted on one strict condition: he had to convert to Mormonism. Although Joe had never been a religious man, he agreed to convert for her. At Lori's suggestion, the couple eloped and were married in a beautiful ceremony on a beach in Maui, Hawaii. During the sunset ceremony, Lori wore a billowing white dress with white flowers in her hair, and Joe gave his new bride an expensive diamond wedding ring. None of the Cox family attended the wedding. Joe's sister, Annie Cushing, visited the couple shortly after they were married and described them as being madly in love. Cushing noted that they looked like an incredibly beautiful couple who resembled celebrities, functioning as a whirlwind of generosity and love. Following their honeymoon, the couple settled into a custom-designed, palatial, 4,500-square-foot home on Island Oaks Lane in Driftwood, which featured a curving staircase and a man-made pond in the backyard. Shortly after moving into their lavish new home, Lori became pregnant with their daughter, Tylee. Tylee Ashlyn Ryan was born on September 24, 2002. Lori was delighted to have a daughter, and her young son, Colby, immediately bonded with his new baby sister. Lori claimed that she had a near-death experience while in labor with Tylee. She stated that after doctors put something into her IV, she died and her spirit fell to the floor. She claimed she watched doctors try to revive her pregnant body while she traveled to heaven with the spirit of her deceased sister, Stacy. Lori claimed that Jesus Christ ultimately commanded her to return to her body to complete her earthly mission. Despite outward appearances, Lori's marriage to Joe Ryan deteriorated rapidly. Joe possessed an explosive temper and could fly into a rage at the slightest provocation. After they married, Lori quit her job and Joe built a hair salon inside their lavish custom home in Driftwood, Texas, so she could continue seeing her old clients. However, during one of his explosive outbursts, Joe completely destroyed the in-home salon with a baseball bat. Joe was also physically abusive toward young Colby, regularly spanking the boy and hitting him on the head. Colby was terrified of his stepfather and actively tried to stay out of his way. In the summer of 2003, Joe's sister, Annie Cushing, visited the family and witnessed deeply disturbing behavior. Cushing was shocked to discover Lori using harsh chemicals to bleach and highlight baby Tylee's hair before the child was even a year old, noting that Lori seemed desperate to boast that she had a blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughter. Cushing also witnessed Joe's explosive rage. When a rainstorm caused a ceiling leak, Joe punched the wall, dropped F-bombs, and threw objects, terrifying the children, including baby Tylee in her walker. Most disturbingly, Cushing watched Joe violently pull 7-year-old Colby across the room by a bent-back hand, take off his belt, and beat the boy. When Cushing intervened and later confronted Lori about the severe physical discipline, Lori was completely unconcerned and very chill about it, indicating that she and Joe had agreed on using the belt. Disgusted by the visit, Cushing left and never saw her brother again. As her marriage fell apart, Lori immersed herself heavily in her Mormon faith, but began veering into radical, uncharted territory. She began to believe that she was receiving instructions from spirits from beyond the veil. She also developed the bizarre belief that her infant daughter, Tylee, was the reincarnation of her deceased sister, Stacy. At night, Lori would isolate herself in an empty, mirrored room in her house, dancing alone for hours to religious music and 1980s rock as a form of meditation to get closer to God. Amidst her crumbling personal life, Lori sought the public spotlight. In 2003, claiming God had told her she would win big, Lori auditioned for and appeared on the TV game show Wheel of Fortune. She traveled to Sony Pictures Studios in California and won $17,500 by solving the final puzzle. On the show, she painted a picture of a perfect life, calling Joe a wonderful husband and bragging about playing sports on their 3-acre property. A few months later, Lori entered and won the Mrs. Hayes County Beauty Pageant. Her sister Summer believed Lori entered the pageant as an outlet and an attempt to save her marriage. Winning the local title qualified her for the Mrs. Texas pageant in June 2004. Lori even got breast implants to improve her chances of winning Mrs. Texas. At the competition, she performed a line dance in a miniskirt and cowboy hat, modeled a teal bikini, and walked the stage in a white sparkly gown. When judges asked her what made her tick, she stated that balancing being a good mom, wife, and worker was not easy, famously declaring, "So I'm basically a ticking time bomb." She did not make the top 5. Just days after the Mrs. Texas pageant in June 2004, Lori filed for divorce from Joe Ryan. Following the separation, Lori sold her diamond wedding ring to a San Antonio jeweler for $4,300. In August 2004, Lori uprooted Colby and Tylee and moved into her parents' home in San Antonio, Texas. She found employment as a hairstylist at the Wildflower Salon in nearby Austin. To help care for Tylee, Lori flew her 15-year-old niece, Melanie, out to Texas to serve as a nanny. This fostered a deep surrogate mother bond between Lori and Melanie that would deeply influence Melanie's life for years to come. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. Lori's divorce from her third husband, Joe Ryan, was officially finalized in Texas on May 6, 2005, on the grounds of insupportability, ending a marriage filled with severe discord. Joe was ordered to pay $1,500 a month in child support. Shortly after, on August 30, 2005, Lori filed for bankruptcy, reporting that she owed nearly $724,000 to creditors. In her filings, she stated she needed at least $6,200 a month for basic living expenses and was renting an apartment in Austin, Texas, for $1,900 a month with her children, Colby and Tylee. She reported earning just $41,000 as a self-employed hairstylist between 2003 and 2005, had $17,000 in credit card debt, and jointly owed nearly $100,000 in taxes with Joe Ryan. Meanwhile, in April 2005, the U.S. District Court denied her parents' legal motions to escape paying taxes, placing a tax lien on her parents' San Antonio property, where Lori and her children had recently been living. In late 2005, Lori was working at her hair salon in Austin when 49-year-old Charles Vallow walked in for a haircut. Charles was a highly successful financial planner and former college baseball player who earned around $250,000 a year, offering Lori a lifeline out of her massive debt. He asked the 32-year-old Lori on a date, and they were soon discussing marriage. On February 24, 2006, Lori married Charles Vallow in Las Vegas. It was Lori's fourth marriage, and yet again, none of her family attended the wedding. Charles eagerly converted to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at Lori's request, and the couple settled into a large house with a pool near Austin. They formed a blended family that included Charles's 2 sons from a previous marriage who visited regularly. Charles provided Lori with a lavish lifestyle, buying designer clothes, taking expensive vacations, and building her a special mirrored dancing room in their home so she could commune with spirits. On August 8, 2006, Lori escalated her bitter custody battle with Joe Ryan by calling the Hays County Sheriff's Office to accuse Joe of sexually abusing Colby and Tylee. The children were interviewed at Roxanne's house, a child advocacy center. While Colby claimed his stepfather had molested him, 3-year-old Tylee denied that her father had ever touched her inappropriately. Lori told detectives she had discovered hundreds of gay porn sites on Joe's computer, claimed he preferred men, and provided a 7-page statement against him. In retaliation, Joe Ryan filed a motion 6 weeks later to have Lori imprisoned for 18 months, accusing her of violating their custody agreement by not living within 100 miles of him. The allegations against Joe Ryan began to unravel in 2007. On March 31, 2007, Tylee was interviewed again by a therapist in Lori's presence. Tylee stated Joe had never hurt her and admitted that Colby and Charles had told her to complain about him doing bad things. The interview was abruptly ended, and Lori appeared to be in shock and disbelief that Tylee had confessed this. Following these interviews, psychologist Vivian Lewis prepared a report that was highly critical of Lori, noting her fanatical religious dogma. Lori told therapists she spoke with a dead lawyer's spirit at night and believed Tylee was the reincarnation of her deceased sister, Stacy. Another therapist warned Lori to stop coaching Tylee to make damaging accusations against Joe, noting the child was bottling up anxiety due to Lori's multiple legal battles. On May 23, 2007, during a custody hearing recess at the Travis County Courthouse, Lori screamed in the busy cafeteria that Joe Ryan had hit her. Joe was arrested for assault with injury, but a witness, Joe's attorney, stated that Lori maliciously fabricated the assault to get back at her ex-husband. By late July 2007, Vivian Lewis filed a sex offender assessment clearing Joe Ryan of the abuse allegations and recommending he be reintroduced into Tylee's life. Lewis's report noted Joe's claims that Lori actually initiated and enjoyed dominance and rape fantasies. Alarmingly, Lewis expressed grave concern because Lori had stated that death would be an option before giving Tylee to her father. Refusing to accept the psychologist's findings, Lori called her brother, Alex Cox, to Austin to deal with Joe Ryan, feeding Alex stories that Joe was a pedophile. On August 5, 2007, Joe Ryan had his first supervised visit with Tylee in over a year. As Joe walked to his car after the visit, Alex Cox ambushed him in the parking lot, threatened him, and shot him in the back with a taser, causing Joe to fall and fracture his wrist. During the attack, Lori and Tylee were sitting in Alex's car watching the entire incident, which Lori had orchestrated. Alex fled the scene, but in December 2007, he was indicted by a Travis County grand jury for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. In September 2008, Charles and Lori Vallow moved their blended family, including 12-year-old Colby and young Tylee, to Chandler, Arizona, a Phoenix suburb known as the Community of Innovation. Charles's finance business was thriving, allowing Lori a life of leisure. They joined the local Mormon temple, attended services every Sunday, and became a respected part of their community. Lori enrolled Tylee in a charter school called the Learning Foundation in Performing Arts, LFPA, in Gilbert, which specialized in performing arts. There, Tylee became best friends with a classmate named Vasia Idaho, and Lori became highly admired by Vasia's mother. Meanwhile, Lori's bitter custody battle with her ex-husband Joe Ryan continued. In early 2008, Tylee's therapists noted inconsistencies in the 5-year-old's claims of sexual abuse, suspecting that Lori was coaching her. During Tylee's first supervised overnight visits with Joe Ryan in August 2008, a supervisor discovered 2 toy guns packed in Tylee's overnight bag by Lori, an act the guardian ad litem found very confusing, given Lori's keen sense of Tylee's developmental stage. Lori's efforts to keep Joe Ryan out of Tylee's life intensified after the move to Arizona, forcing Ryan to make a 2,000-mile round trip to visit his daughter. On July 26, 2009, Ryan called the police after getting into a heated argument with Lori during a visitation handover inside a Barnes & Noble in Gilbert, Arizona. A week later, Lori failed to bring Tylee to a scheduled exchange. In 2009 alone, Lori was found guilty of 7 different counts of civil contempt for her campaign to deny Ryan access to Tylee. In late December 2009, Joe Ryan flew to Phoenix to see Tylee perform in a school Christmas play, but Lori whisked Tylee away immediately after it finished to deny him his holiday visit. Ryan eventually took a 40% pay cut to relocate to Phoenix to be closer to Tylee, but Lori stubbornly continued to fight his involvement, leading Ryan to email her in August 2011, pleading with her to sacrifice her animosity for their daughter's well-being. Around 2012, Lori's interest in near-death experiences and apocalyptic prophecies deepened into a severe obsession after she read her cousin Braxton Southwick's self-published book, A Letter to My Friends, as well as John Pontius's 2012 book, Visions of Glory. Outwardly, however, she remained highly engaged in her community. During the summers of 2012 and 2013, Lori helped run a youth summer camp at the Chandler Center for the Arts, enthusiastically directing Tylee and Vizia in productions like Broadway Kids. On May 25, 2012, Charles Vallow's nephew's girlfriend gave birth to a premature baby boy named Kanan Trahan, who had drugs in his system. Charles and Lori offered to adopt the child from the boy's caretakers, Charles's sister Kay Woodcock and her husband Larry. On February 14, 2013, Charles and Lori collected the 9-month-old baby and brought him home to Chandler. The couple renamed him Joshua Jackson J.J. Vallow. J.J. was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and Lori excelled in caring for him, teaching Colby and Tylee how to prepare his bottles and soothe him. Tylee, meanwhile, continued to face severe health issues, spending her 11th birthday on September 24, 2013, in Phoenix Children's Hospital battling pancreatitis. In early 2014, Lori and Charles decided to relocate to the Hawaiian island of Kauai once Colby graduated high school and JJ's adoption was finalized. In April, Lori, Charles, Tylee, and Lori's mother took a secret reconnaissance trip to Kauai to view houses in the Kapaa district. When Joe Ryan discovered the plan, he emailed Lori on April 22, 2014, threatening to use the court process to oppose Tylee's relocation. In June, Lori emailed Ryan to negotiate a visitation schedule, insisting that Charles had accepted a job in Hawaii and they were moving by August. During the first week of August 2014, just a week after the state of Louisiana issued the final decree for adoption for JJ, the Vallow family moved to Kauai, followed closely by Lori's parents and grandmother. Charles and Lori rented a large house on Aloali Drive in the exclusive Princeville area, while Lori's parents rented a condo nearby. Lori enrolled Tylee in a traditional Hawaiian school, hired a nanny for JJ, and bought JJ a Pomeranian dog named Crushy. The family joined the local LDS branch in Hanalei, where Lori immediately befriended a woman named April Raymond. Lori threw herself into church life, becoming president of the primary program, teaching a group of 20 children the gospel of Jesus Christ, and recruiting April to run the Young Women's program. To keep Lori occupied while he traveled for work, Charles set up a business for her on Kealia Beach called Juice Island, which she operated out of an old food truck. In 2015, Lori was living what appeared to be an idyllic life in Princeville on the Hawaiian island of Kauai with her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, her teenage daughter, Tylee, and their newly adopted autistic son, JJ. In early 2015, Lori's brother Alex Cox arrived to stay with them because he was struggling in Arizona. Lori introduced Alex to her friend April Raymond, confiding in April that Alex had previously gone to jail for trying to kill her ex-husband Joe Ryan, and that she felt responsible for him. April found Alex a little off, and he made her deeply uncomfortable by asking intimate questions about her weight and ring size to compare her to Lori, possessing a strange and creepy preoccupation with his sister. During the summer of 2015, Lori's 19-year-old son, Colby, left Hawaii to serve an LDS mission in Idaho. However, he suffered emotional trauma and quit the mission early, returning to Kauai. Lori felt embarrassed and judged by her Mormon congregation for his early return. Charles gave Colby an ultimatum to get a job or move out, After 2 short-lived jobs at Ace Hardware and Foodland, Colby moved to Arizona to attend college. Meanwhile, Tylee was thriving in 8th grade, studying traditional Hawaiian culture and participating in local dance performances. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. Tylee's best friend from Arizona, Vaisia Idaho, often flew out to stay with the family, and the 2 girls would spend hours making sarcastic, funny GoPro videos on the beach. Lori was considered a cool mom who was highly relatable to the teens, staying up all night to talk with them and pushing Vaisia to become more involved in the LDS church. Around this time, when Tylee was 13, Tylee made a definitive phone call to her biological father, Joe Ryan, confronting him about his past behavior and telling him she never wanted to see him again. She was completely drained by the call. While in Hawaii, Lori's religious beliefs began to shift. She recommended LDS authors to Vaisia, specifically singling out Chad Daybell and his End Times novels, which she was obsessively reading. She also attended a conference featuring near-death experience, NDE, visionary Julie Rowe, and began avidly listening to Rowe's podcasts. Lori told friends that the world was going to end and that everyone would die, occasionally making morbid comments such as wanting to drive her kids off a cliff. Lori's parents, Barry and Janice Cox, had also been living in Kauai, but were embroiled in a massive, decades-long battle with the IRS over hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid taxes. In May 2017, a U.S. District Court in Hawaii dismissed Janice's frivolous lawsuit, claiming she was immune from taxes. Immediately following this court defeat, Lori's parents abruptly moved back to the mainland, and Lori, Charles, and their children quickly followed suit, leaving Kauai in a highly rushed, unplanned manner. The family relocated to a beautiful rental home in Santan Valley, a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. Here, Lori and Charles taught Sunday school at their local LDS ward, and the congregation adored JJ, who was known as an energetic, sometimes inappropriately loud, but wonderful boy. However, behind closed doors, Lori began distancing herself from Charles. Back in Arizona, Lori plunged deeper into radical offshoots of Mormonism, discovering the Another Voice of Warning, Prepper website, and embracing the concept of multiple mortal probations, reincarnation. She began to believe she was a translated God chosen to lead the 144,000 survivors of the coming apocalypse. She went to the LDS temple for hours every day, prayed to spirit voices, and spent her nights dancing alone to 1980s music in a special mirrored room Charles built for her. In fact, having a mirrored room for dancing was a recurring theme throughout Lori's life, and her daughter's friend noted that setting up a room full of mirrors was something Lori did, no matter where they lived. Lori even told her nephew, Zach Cox, that she was becoming an immortal being and no longer needed to eat, sleep, or use the bathroom. Despite her growing delusions, Lori continued to seek care for JJ. She enrolled the 5-year-old at Lawrence Institute for Education, or LIFE, a school for special needs children. Because JJ suffered from severe insomnia and would sneak out of the house at night, Charles installed deadbolts and alarms. In late 2017, they also hired a trainer, Neil Mestas, to provide JJ with a specially trained service dog, a black golden doodle named Bailey. During this time, Colby got engaged to a young woman named Kelsey. Because Kelsey was not Mormon, Lori became intensely jealous and viewed Kelsey as a rival, acting more like a jealous girlfriend than a mother, which frustrated Colby. In January 2018, Colby and Kelsey married in Lori and Charles's backyard. The event reunited the entire Cox family, though Tylee arrived late and missed the official photos. In March 2018, Charles Vallow's beloved 85-year-old mother passed away. Charles's family held a funeral in Louisiana, but Lori flatly refused to attend, claiming she was too busy. Charles flew alone, and his sister, Kay Woodcock, noted this as the first major sign that Lori had completely disconnected from the marriage. While Lori's life appeared luxurious, her third husband, Joe Ryan, had hit rock bottom. Following Tylee's move to Hawaii and her refusal to see him, Ryan became deeply depressed and started drinking heavily. He received 3 DUIs, lost his job, and lost his house, briefly becoming destitute and living with his former divorce attorney before planning to move to New York to stay with his sister, Annie Cushing. He never made it. On April 3, 2018, neighbors complained of a terrible smell and swarms of flies coming from Ryan's Phoenix apartment. Police entered through a back window. The front door was dead-bolted from the inside, and found Ryan's badly decomposed body on his bed. He had been dead for approximately 3 weeks. The apartment was barren, containing only pictures of Tylee, bills, lottery tickets, and medications. The medical examiner determined he died of a heart attack caused by arteriosclerosis. Because no family claimed his body, he was cremated. On April 13, 2018, Phoenix police discovered Lori was listed as Ryan's next of kin and notified her. Lori lied to the officer, claiming she had not heard from him in 2 years. Shortly after, Lori took Tylee to the apartment to remove all his personal papers, files, and photo albums. Lori stood to gain control of Joe's life insurance policy, but the funds were designated for Tylee, with Lori acting as the trustee. A week later, Lori gleefully told Kay Woodcock about the insurance money and stated that God had taken Joe because he was evil, saying, "Now we don't have to worry about him anymore." When Joe's sister, Annie Cushing, finally learned of his death, she confronted Lori. Lori acted as if it was no big deal and told Annie, "The world is a better place without Joe Ryan." Annie flew to Phoenix to comfort Tylee and witnessed deeply disturbing behavior from Lori. Lori showed Annie Joe's driver's license, where he looked bloated and unrecognizable, and proudly displayed his photo albums, which still carried the pungent smell of his decomposing corpse. Annie noted that Lori possessed a manic enthusiasm about the death, graphically describing the grotesque state of Joe's mattress until Annie had to beg her to stop. During this visit, Annie also noticed significant friction between Lori and Tylee, observing that Lori almost kowtowed to her strong-willed daughter. Furthermore, Lori continually brought up the end times to Annie, stating that the coming apocalypse would be so horrific she thought it would be better to put her kids in a car and drive them off a cliff. When she saw Annie's horrified reaction, Lori quickly walked the comment back, claiming she was just kidding and would never hurt her children. Following the death of Joe Ryan, Lori Vallow's interest in the end times escalated into a severe obsession. In October 2018, Lori attended a class in Mesa, Arizona, focused on food storage and end-of-time survival strategies. The class was taught by Melanie Gibb, a devout Mormon writer and life coach. The two women instantly connected over their shared interests in the Second Coming and the fact that they both had children on the autism spectrum. Lori was especially thrilled to learn that Melanie knew Chad Daybell, an author whose Doomsday books Lori had been obsessively reading. Lori began cultivating a close relationship with Melanie, visiting her home and inviting Melanie to her own. On October 19, 2018, Melanie invited Lori to a small, Preparing a People meeting at her home in Gilbert, Arizona. During the meeting, Lori spoke to the group for a half hour, claiming she was a personal witness of the resurrected Jesus Christ, that she was regularly ministered to by the angel Moroni, and that she no longer needed to sleep because angels woke her up at 4 a.m. with instructions. Shockingly, Lori also confessed to the group that she had previously planned to murder her ex-husband Joe Ryan, claiming she had searched the scriptures for justification to kill him, like Nephi killed, to protect her children. The following week, over the last weekend of October, Lori, Melanie, and several other women drove 415 miles to St. George, Utah, for a Preparing a People conference. Chad Daybell was a featured speaker. On Friday night, after Chad delivered his speech, he sat at a vendor table selling his books. Lori approached his table and told him she had read all of his books. Melanie Gibb introduced them, later describing the moment as electric. Chad looked up at the beautiful blonde and was instantly smitten. They began exchanging spiritual experiences and visions, blissfully staring into each other's eyes. Chad immediately informed Lori that his spiritual gifts revealed she was an exalted goddess and a translated being, and that they had been married 7 times before in previous lives. He claimed that during the time of Jesus, he was Jesus's apostle and brother, James the Just, and she was his wife, Elena. Chad told Lori they had been chosen by God to gather the 144,000 to usher in the new millennium. Lori spent the rest of the weekend helping Chad sell his books. Before leaving, Lori asked Chad to use his gifts to gauge whether her family members were light or dark spirits, and they exchanged phone numbers, agreeing to meet in Arizona in a few weeks. On the drive back to Arizona, Lori had her friend Zulema Pastenis Google James the Just and read Doctrine and Covenants 7711 aloud to the car. She couldn't stop talking about Chad. Chad returned to his wife Tammy in Rexburg, Idaho, but was intensely infatuated with Lori. On October 30th, 2018, Chad emailed Lori a detailed family history information document. Using a tarnished gold owl necklace as a pendulum, Chad had graded the light and dark spirit levels of Lori's family. He designated Lori as a 4.3E light, but rated her teenage daughter Tylee as 4.1 dark, and her ex-husband Joe Ryan as 4.3D. Chad and Lori quickly obtained burner cell phones to maintain secrecy from their spouses. They spoke for hours every day, and Lori began sending Chad sexy videos of her nightly dancing sessions. Chad sent Lori a stream of text messages written like an erotic story starring their past life personas, James and Elena. Chad traveled 900 miles to Mesa, Arizona for the next PAP conference on November 16th, but arrived a day early to stay at Lori's house in Chandler while her husband, Charles Vallow, was away on business. Lori picked Chad up from the airport and drove to a hotel where they passionately made out on a couch. Chad gave her a blessing, claiming to remove her life's troubles, and filled her body with a balm of light and love. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. At the conference, the two sold books together and snuck away into the back seat of Lori's car for another makeout session. They also visited the Mesa LDS temple, where they took an early morning walk holding hands. During this trip, Chad went rogue and used his claimed priesthood authority to secretly seal himself and Lori in marriage for time and eternity, despite both still being legally married to their spouses. Lori claimed that Jesus Christ and the angel Moroni were physically present at this secret sealing. That weekend, Lori hosted several women at her home, including Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenis. Chad sat on the coffee table and taught the women about translation and his scoring system for spirits, and claimed he had an information portal in his home to communicate with beings beyond the veil. That night, while the other guests slept, Chad opened his guest room door to find Lori tiptoeing toward him. They locked themselves in his room and shared a night of intense passion. Following Chad's visit, Lori's attitude toward her husband Charles abruptly shifted, becoming cold, critical, and distant. She confided to Melanie Gibb that Chad had constructed a spiritual portal in her closet so he could travel 1,000 miles to visit her ethereally whenever they wanted. Lori also began telling her nephew, Zach Cox, that she was becoming an immortal being and no longer needed to eat, sleep, or use the bathroom. Zach once came home to find 30 cars in the driveway and the living room packed with strangers attending one of Lori's spiritual meetings. On November 26, 2018, Lori made her podcast debut on the PAP Network's show Time to Warrior Up, alongside Melanie Gibb and Jason Moe. She publicly declared herself a gatherer and told the audience, "We're gathering as saints, preparing for the second coming of Christ. This is the time to warrior up." Convinced the apocalypse was near, Lori began stockpiling food and sent unwanted 30-day emergency food buckets to her brother Adam. As the year closed, Melanie Gibb questioned whether it was appropriate for Lori and Chad to be engaged in an affair. Lori justified it by explaining they had been married many times before, and that Jesus knew it was their mission to lead the 144,000. In mid-December, author Julie Rowe met Chad for breakfast in Idaho Falls and warned him that Lori was acting like a groupie. Chad defended the relationship, insisting to Rowe that he and Lori had been married in previous lives. Chad Guy Daybell was born on August 11, 1968, in Provo, Utah. His parents, Jack and Sheila Daybell, were devout members of the LDS Church who had married shortly after high school while Jack was in the U.S. Naval Reserve. Chad was the oldest of 5 children, followed by brothers Paul, Matt, and Brad, and sister Rebecca. After his father's naval service ended, the family moved to Springville, Utah, where Jack worked as an electrician at the Geneva steel plant. Chad grew up feeling somewhat neglected, noting that his parents' attention was often consumed by his younger siblings, which left him feeling like he needed to find ways to stand out. Chad's morbid fascination with death began early. In 3rd grade, a classmate died in a cave collapse, an event that deeply unsettled him. In 4th grade, he wrote his first book, a gory, handwritten short novel titled The Murder of Dr. J and His Assistant. A teacher's aide bound the book and placed a picture of an evil-looking owl on the cover, sparking Chad's lifelong obsession with owls, which he believed possessed secret powers from beyond the veil. At age 13, Chad demonstrated a strange inclination toward violence. While walking home from school, he came across a patch of clover busy with honeybees and began violently stomping on them, meticulously keeping count until he had crushed 120 bees. He only stopped because he claimed he heard a booming voice tell him to stop killing God's innocent creatures. Chad would later frequently attribute his actions to this disembodied voice, which he simply called the Voice, claiming it whispered and sometimes shouted direct, militaristic commands to him. Chad was highly active in Springville, playing t-ball in his youth and later playing high school football and baseball. He was an excellent student who consistently made the honor roll, served as the seminary class president and student council treasurer, and loved fly fishing and reading. However, he also recalled being bullied in middle school, leaving him mad at the world. At age 14, feeling depressed and convinced he might die young, Chad eagerly sought out his LDS patriarchal blessing, which assured him he had a long life ahead, would marry a wonderful woman, and would cultivate spiritual gifts later in life. In August 1985, at age 17, Chad had what he considered his first near-death experience. While cliff jumping with a church group at Flaming Gorge Reservoir, he leaped from a 60-foot cliff. When he hit the water, he claimed his spirit left his body and he glimpsed another dimension, feeling that his personal veil had been ripped open. He credited this event with sparking an extreme interest in apocalyptic fringe LDS writings, specifically the hyper-paranoid constitutionalist works of W. Cleon Skousen. Chad graduated from Springville High School with high honors in May 1986. After completing his freshman year at Brigham Young University, BYU, Chad left to serve a 2-year LDS mission in New Jersey, proselytizing in tough Spanish-speaking neighborhoods in Newark and Union City. It was during this mission that he claimed to have first sensed the spirit of his deceased grandfather, Keith Daybell, walking beside him. Chad later adopted Keith as his primary spirit guide. Chad returned to BYU in 1989 to study journalism, working his way up to city editor of the student newspaper, The Daily Universe. There, he largely focused on writing stories about death and religion. That summer, he spotted a photo of a young woman named Tammy Douglas in his brother's high school yearbook. He learned she was the secretary at the Springville Cemetery and arranged to meet her at a church singles event where they immediately hit it off. To spend more time with her, Chad took a part-time job digging graves at the cemetery. After a brief courtship, Chad and 19-year-old Tammy were married in the Manti LDS Temple on March 9, 1990. Chad graduated from BYU with a bachelor's degree in communications in April 1992, and the couple welcomed their first son, Garth, a month later. Chad's early career involved several moves and job changes. In the summer of 1992, he moved his family to Ogden, Utah, taking a job as a copy editor for the Ogden Standard Examiner. He was known by coworkers as a shy, dependable, soft-spoken, clean liver who rarely socialized outside of work. In May 1993, while vacationing in La Jolla, California, Chad had his second NDE. While searching for seashells on the rocks, he was swept into the ocean by a massive wave. As he tumbled underwater, he claimed his spirit left his body and entered a yellow tunnel of light, where his deceased grandfather Keith and ancestor Finity Daybell appeared to him. They purportedly outlined a series of future earthly missions he and his unborn children would need to accomplish. After this, Chad believed his veil remained permanently open, granting him constant visions and access to the spirit world. Unhappy with the hours of copy editing, Chad moved his family back to Springville in late 1995, where they lived in a cramped double-wide trailer. Chad took a job as the sexton of the Springville Cemetery, managing the grounds and digging graves. The couple went on to have 4 more children: Emma, 1994, Seth, 1995, Leah, 1998, and Mark, 2000. In the winter of 1997, while shoveling snow at the cemetery, Chad claimed the voice told him it was time to start writing books. He immediately outlined a time travel novel based on his daughter, titled An Errand for Emma, which was picked up by Cedar Fort Publishing and became a regional bestseller. He followed it with sequels, Doug's Dilemma and Escape to Zion, marking his transition into writing about the apocalyptic end times. In 1999, Chad quit the cemetery to work as a regional sales manager for a computer recycling company, but quickly pivoted back to publishing, taking a job as a managing editor at Cedar Fort in 2001. He also wrote nonfiction memoirs about his grave-digging days, including One Foot in the Grave. In 2004, Chad and Tammy launched their own publishing company, Spring Creek Book Company. Tammy served as the CFO, accountant, and cover designer, while Chad signed authors. They initially saw great success, publishing dozens of LDS authors and winning the LDS Booksellers Association's Outstanding Small Wholesaler of the Year award in 2005. Chad also continued to write his own fictional end times series, Standing in Holy Places and Times of Turmoil, which depicted plagues, earthquakes, and foreign invasions. However, by late 2008, Spring Creek Books went bankrupt, leaving the couple over $200,000 in debt. Chad was forced to return to work as a cemetery sexton in Spanish Fork, and Tammy took a part-time job at a local elementary school. Chad blamed the failure on the recession, but the financial stress caused Tammy to suffer a deep depression. In 2013, Chad returned to the Springville Parks Department as a sexton. In February 2014, Chad discovered the writings of Julie Rowe on the fringe LDS prepper forum AVOW, Another Voice of Warning. Rowe claimed to have NDE visions of the coming apocalypse, and Chad eagerly offered to publish her book, A Greater Tomorrow. Rowe's book became a massive success in the LDS prepper community. Chad began riding Rowe's coattails, giving speeches, appearing on podcasts, and promoting his own NDEs. In August 2014, while pumping gas in St. Anthony, Idaho, the voice told Chad he would soon move there. In early 2015, he had a vision of Rexburg, Idaho, serving as a city of light and a safe haven during the coming apocalypse. Without consulting Tammy, he decided they were moving. Despite her initial anger, she ultimately agreed, and they bought a house on 4 acres in Salem, Idaho, just outside Rexburg, in June 2015. Chad took a sales job at Falls Printing Company, but devoted most of his time to his growing prepper following. He was eventually fired from his printing job due to his radical ideology. By 2017, Chad was heavily involved with Preparing a People, PAP, a multimedia organization hosting end times conferences. He became a featured speaker, charming audiences with his soft-spoken demeanor and tales of multiple probations, reincarnation. He claimed to have lived 31 past lives, including as Methuselah and James the Just, the brother of Jesus. He began using a tarnished gold owl necklace as a pendulum to divine people's past lives and grade their spirits on a light and dark scale. He told his followers that he was a translated being, an immortal who didn't need to eat or sleep, and had the power to teleport through portals. In the fall of 2018, Chad met Melanie Gibb at a preparedness camp, and she later became the Arizona representative for Preparing a People. On October 26, 2018, Chad drove from Rexburg to St. George, Utah, to speak at a PAP conference. During the drive, the voice spoke to him, warning him that he would meet an extraordinary woman today who will change your life forever. In January 2019, Lori was deeply involved in her secret relationship with Chad Daybell, who had begun poisoning her mind against her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Early in the month, Chad called Lori with a revelation. Charles's body, he said, had been taken over by a deceased demonic entity named Nick Schneider. Lori embraced it without hesitation, calling Charles by the demon's name to his face and telling her nephew matter-of-factly that the man they knew was gone and something else was wearing his skin. Chad also flew to Arizona in mid-January to be a special guest on a 2-part episode of Lori and Melanie Gibbs' podcast, Time to Warrior Up. On January 29th, while Charles was traveling to Houston for a business trip, Lori enacted a plan against him. She transferred $35,000 from Charles's business account into a new account in her own name, leaving him with only $7 and preventing him from meeting his $8,000 company payroll. When Charles landed in Houston, Lori called to coldly inform him that she was a god assigned to gather the $144,000 for the second coming in July 2020. She reminded him of exactly what he was, Nick Schneider, a demonic interloper, and made herself perfectly clear he was interfering with her divine mission, and if he tried to stop her, she would murder him with her powers and have an angel dispose of his body. Lori then recruited Melanie Gibb to help her go to the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport long-term parking lot, where they used a spare key to move Charles's truck to a friend's house. Lori canceled Charles's return flight, hired a locksmith to change all the locks on their home, and packed up Charles's clothes, computers, and business files, hiding them behind her massive Doomsday food storage in a closet. Lori then checked into a Hyatt hotel with her daughter Tylee, her adopted son JJ, and JJ's service dog Bailey. When Charles managed to fly back and arrived at the house on January 31st, he could not get inside. He called the Gilbert Police Department for a welfare check, explaining to officers that Lori had lost her reality, believed she was married to the angel Moroni, went to the LDS temple every day to receive instructions from beyond the veil, and claimed she was an immortal, translated being who could not be killed. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. The next morning, Charles intercepted Lori as she was dropping JJ off at his special needs school in her black Infiniti QX80. While she was inside, Charles took Lori's purse, her credit cards, and her iPhone from the car. Charles then used Lori's phone to text her friends and family, pretending to be her, to try to figure out what she was doing. In response, Lori went to the Gilbert police station with Tylee and Melanie Gibb to file a report against Charles for stealing her purse, angrily noting that she was really mad about my lip gloss being inside it. During the interview, Lori giggled and charmed the officers, framing Charles as an erratic, sneaky man who was trying to steal her money and take JJ. The police contacted Charles, who arrived at the station with Lori's purse and an emergency mental health petition he had secured to have Lori involuntarily evaluated. When an officer told Lori about the evaluation, Tylee joked that her mother was going to get a padded room, and Lori laughingly asked if the facility had a gym she could work out in. Lori voluntarily checked herself into Community Bridges for the evaluation, passed it with flying colors by appearing completely normal, and was released a few hours later. Following the psychiatric evaluation, Lori disappeared for nearly 2 months. She left JJ in Charles's care without telling him where she was, later telling police she did this to punish Charles and let him see what I've been doing for the last 7 years. In the first few days of February, Lori and Tylee flew unannounced to Kauai, Hawaii. Lori called her former friend April Raymond from the airport, stating she had left Charles for good, taken his money, telling April it was $50,000 and needed a place to stay. Lori and Tylee stayed in April's master bedroom for about a week. During this time, Lori exhibited manic behavior, sorting through stacks of papers detailing Chad Daybell's light and dark, spirit rubrics, and told April that Charles was dead and possessed by a demon. Lori declared that Tylee and Joe Ryan were also dark spirits. Lori attempted to gather April as one of the 144,000, telling her they would travel the world together for their mission, but insisted April must abandon her 2 young children to join her. April refused the offer. Lori then moved with Tylee into the luxurious Kauai Beach resort, spending freely using $80,000 from Joe Ryan's life insurance policy and a debit card attached to Tylee's money. While in Hawaii, Lori opened a local bank account, applied for a new Social Security card, and asked April to help her and Tylee get jobs at the St. Regis Princeville Resort. Back on the mainland, Charles Vallow filed for divorce and sole custody of JJ on February 8th, citing Lori's obsession with near-death experiences, her claims of being a god, and her threats to murder him. Charles also discovered Lori had transferred 2,000 Enterprise Rent-A-Car points out of their joint account. On February 16th, Chad Daybell and Melanie Gibb spoke at a Preparing a People conference in Boise, Idaho. Charles had process servers waiting at the Boise airport to serve Lori with divorce papers, but she never showed up. During her time in Hawaii, Lori remained in constant contact with Chad and Zulema Pastines. In late February, Lori texted Zulema that she had flown to the island of Oahu to visit the LDS temple and claimed she had successfully commanded the clouds and rain to cease for the whole day. Lori and Zulema also texted about how their physical bodies were changing due to their exalted status. Lori claimed they were getting 4 days younger every day, noting that her menstrual cycle had become heavy and crampy like a 20-year-old's, which she described as a similitude of the blood sacrifice, to remind them they belonged to Jesus. In early March, Charles Vallow instructed his attorney to drop the divorce proceedings, hoping he could still get through to his wife. Meanwhile, Lori flew to Idaho on March 3rd. In mid-March, Melanie Gibb flew out to Hawaii to join Lori at the Kauai Beach Resort. Lori spent time with Gibb and April Raymond, but exhibited intense paranoia, abruptly claiming that a stranger at a nearby restaurant table was filming her on Charles's behalf to spy on her. After spending long periods on the phone with Chad, Lori abruptly announced she was returning to the mainland. On March 19th, she flew with Chad from Idaho Falls back to Arizona. In late March, Lori organized a weekend-long spiritual retreat at Zulema Pastines' house in Arizona. The gathering included Lori, Zulema, Melanie Gibb, Christina Atwood, Nicole Earle, and Serena Sharp, who flew in from New England. At this retreat, Lori claimed that because she was a translated being with a high vibration, she had not traveled from Hawaii to Arizona on an airplane, but had instead teleported through a portal. Lori took charge of the women with the quiet authority of someone who had never once doubted herself. She distributed sticky notes revealing the names each woman had carried in her past life. Melanie Gibb became Phoebe. Serena Sharp became Raina. When Lori couldn't remember how to pronounce one of the names, she didn't hesitate. She pulled out her burner phone and called Chad. She then assigned each woman a spiritual element, fire, earth, ice, water, to be wielded as a weapon. They formed a circle and conducted what Lori called a casting, a ritual designed to drive the demon out of Charles Vallow's body once and for all. When it was over, Lori called Chad. He confirmed it had worked. But a few days later, he called back with an update. The demon, he said, had returned, more powerful than before. When Charles called for a welfare check earlier in the year, he explicitly warned officers that his wife was threatening to kill him. Lori told him over the phone, "You're not Charles. I don't know who you are or what you did with Charles, but I can murder you now with my powers." Fearing for his life and the safety of his son, JJ, Charles filed an emergency mental health petition to have Lori involuntarily evaluated at a psychiatric facility. In the petition, Charles documented her threats in chilling detail, writing that Lori had explicitly warned him, "I was in the way, and she would have to murder me if I tried to stop her," adding that she would have an angel there to help dispose of my body. The officers were sympathetic, but they were skeptical that Lori's religious ramblings, however disturbing, rose to the level of an actionable threat. They told Charles there was nothing they could do. They couldn't hold her against her will. They couldn't force an evaluation. Charles Vallow had tried to warn them. He had put it in writing, signed his name to it, and handed it directly to law enforcement. He had looked officers in the eye and told them his wife had threatened to kill him. He had documented her exact words. He had done everything right, and they walked away. To be concluded next week.